Hi, and welcome to a Small Medium at Large podcast. I'm your host, Gail Heisen, bringing you intimate stories that heal. I want to thank all of you listeners for subscribing, for liking, for sharing, and for sending your very thoughtful comments. We've been giving shows out here now for 1 year. It's our first completed year being on a podcast, and I've thoroughly enjoyed the experience and all the wonderful people that have been on here and the amazing friendships that I have now through this podcast. I'm hoping it's brought healing and great information to the rest of you, and I hope you've liked the guests that we've had. We've tried to keep them of an all assorted variety of kinds of guests with no judgments here. So I'm glad you're watching us. I'm glad you know that you can hear us on Spotify, on Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, and a Small Medium at Large YouTube. So have a really great show here coming up. And I want to welcome our very special guest, Karen Johnson. I'd like to tell you a little bit about Karen that I'm going to read to you from her bio and from the amazing accomplishments that this woman has done. Karen Johnson is a graduate of Georgetown Law Center and a former Fulbright scholar in Afghanistan, and holds a master's degree in public health and public and international affairs. Karen is a retired federal administration law judge, first one I've had on the show, who practiced criminal and energy law for more than 30 years. She also is a former U.S. Army officer and a major in the USAR. Karen was personally trained by Alberto, I'm not sure if this is how you say it, Villoldo,
yeah.
Villoldo, and is faculty at the Four Winds Society and a master practitioner of energy medicine. She has trained extensively in the techniques of illumination, soul retrieval, extractions of energies and entities, divination, and death rites. Her book, Living Grieving, Using Energy Medicine to Alchemize Grief and Loss, is her first book that is doing incredibly well, and we hope that you pick up a copy because she has amazing exercises. I want to just tell you a little bit more about Karen. She was leading a fast-paced professional career as a federal judge, and she came to an abrupt halt when she lost her 27-year-old son to a heroin overdose. Rather than grieve in a way that made most people around her comfortable, she did the unexpected. She quit her job, sold her house, sold and got rid of all her belongings, and went on a 2.5-year journey around the world, finding a spiritual and healing practice along the way. Karen didn't think she could find her way out of despair, but she found a process that works, and she shares her journey of transformation with others so they can heal too. Her work is structured around healing practices, mindfulness, and the journey of the Four Winds medicine wheel. Karen blends her story with meaningful experiences, offering exercises related to each of the 4 practices of becoming unstuck, becoming lighter, awakening, and creating a new life. Today, let's welcome Karen. Hi, Karen.
Hi, Gail. Thank you so much for having me. Oh my gosh, I'm so happy to be here.
I'm so happy to have you here also. And I have to say, just the opening line of federal judge turns into shaman is enough to grab me. I was just, and then when I got to read your book, how well written it is and how much information you have to offer, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I want to start, before I go into shamanism and all these other things, I want to ask you what happened in your life that here you are, a federal judge, you're wearing your robes, you're doing your thing, you're living in Washington, D.C., you have a beautiful home, lovely family, and all of a sudden you switch your life radically. How did that happen?
Well, it was the death of my 27-year-old son, Ben, to a heroin overdose. And he and I are super close. And so it just hit me really, really hard. And I didn't have any spiritual practice. So I'm not one of the people that came from yogic, Buddhist, Christian. I didn't have one. I decided it was all hogwash and alive is alive and dead is dead. And I didn't believe in much of anything. So very left brain, very, although when I was younger, I had some experiences with entities and energies that were around me as a child. But as I grew over, I said, no, I'm not going to deal with any of that, and just really was very left-brained.
When you had the childhood experiences, if you would like to share them, did
Yeah.
you have any support or anyone that you could turn to when you were having them to?
Oh, no. In fact, my mother told me, don't talk about that. Don't tell anybody. You're gonna be sent to a crazy house in those days, like, that kind of stuff. So she said, and that's just all made up. You're just making, that's your imagination. Don't even talk about it. Because I had an imaginary friend who lived in a tree. I had wings, so maybe a fairy, right? So we had years and years of a close relationship. And then I also I never went in the basement because there was an entity that looked to me like an Indian chief and scared me. He was very somber, very solemn, and so he scared me. So later on, I found out recently, I found out those entities are still with me. She was to help me to have fun, and he was to be there when I needed courage.
Mhm.
And so it was like those two entities came in when I needed them. They're different aspects of their personality. Because I'm a Capricorn. I'm very duty, honor, I no fun. Let's get the work done first, so the fairy comes into
Just being in the military, I mean, like I imagine I would just explode or whatever after one day of training. I don't think I could ever go through something like this. So you have to be a very strong, disciplined person.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. You have to kind of have that side to you of, oh, you're not gonna scare me, right?
And as I understand, you were raised in a family where you were being led towards paths of tremendous achievement and success, and it has to be more, and you have to do all these things to make all
Never
these
good enough,
accomplishments.
never right enough, not enough, and and also I wanted to be an archaeologist or anthropologist, and my parents just talked me out and said that's just not safe for a woman. You need to pick something more practical. And in those days, that was hard to believe, but it was before cell phones, before internet. And so it was more difficult to contact people, so in a sense, they had a lot more to worry about, although I think they just didn't like that idea anyway. So I ended up becoming a judge, going to grad school, getting lots of degrees, and becoming almost a professional student before I got a job. And then it just kind of went unconscious for 30 years doing what I thought I was supposed to do, get married, have children, take care of the parents, all those things that we're supposed to do, get the house, get the cars, get the mortgage, until my son passed. And it was like I was thrown out of the matrix, thrown out of life. And I woke up looking around me going, I hate all this. I don't even like this. I don't like driving. I've been driving in the second worst traffic in the country for 30 years. I don't really like the people I work with. I don't really like the cases anymore. I don't like anything about my life. What am I doing? And
Would you say you felt numb during those years?
numb, yes. I don't even remember my 40s. From 40, I just don't remember what I did. I was raising kids, taking care of parents, climbing the ladder. I just don't have a lot of memories of those years. Not a lot of pictures, not a lot of memories, not a lot of anything.
So it's sort of like you were just moving through time and life, but the rest of you wasn't actually there with you.
No, and I think a lot of people do that. We just go unconscious. We're doing what we're supposed to do, and we're not really looking deeply at what we might want to do if we could.
And I think part of it, I might be wrong here, and I'm always saying, I could be wrong about anything, but I feel like I grew up in the East Coast, which I believe you grew up in the East Coast.
Mm-hmm.
And I moved out to the West Coast as a teenager at 15. And the pressure there of always dressing nice and looking like professional or whatever it is that you were doing, and of everyone in your family saying, so what have you done? Or what is, like, they mark your goodness or something by how much you've monetarily accomplished. and
Yeah.
that the goal is always to be, and my grandfather used to say, is she doing good in school or whatever is it? And if you weren't doing those things, it was like that, so
Right.
the East Coast mentality also is very aggressive and very competitive.
Very
And
competitive.
I
Yeah.
couldn't live in that world. I did not feel like I fit in. I wanted to be with nature and trees and things that had nothing to do with this. And my goal wasn't that I was going to make tons of money. And so none of those things, I never felt like I fit in the East Coast. And when I got to California, oh, it was tarot card readings and, all kinds of, every kind of hippy dippy thing you could imagine. And, it was free love, whatever. It was just such a different culture here that didn't, and, when you went to school in New York, the educational system there back then,
Yeah.
we're 2 years difference. Back then was, there was a very good educational system.
Mm-hmm.
But I came to California and when I had went to some schools here, it was like, wow, we were way advanced. Like the things that we were learning back then was in much later grades in here. So I think that getting even away from the culture of what's supporting that when you left Washington, D.C., because I'm sure everyone that you were with in a train or wherever you went, everyone was there to succeed.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah, for sure.
And that meant who you were. So I always felt like I was a
absolutely.
nothing in my family because I didn't go to college and I didn't get a degree and I didn't go to high school. So I did everything wrong that you're not supposed to do.
Right.
And I'm
Right.
grateful now for that.
Yes, yes. I had an opportunity to live for a couple of years in San Clemente in California, and I just was amazed at the difference in the lifestyle. People would pack up their camper and go to the beach for the whole weekend with their kids, right? That was just astonishing to me. I'm like, how do they have time? Don't they have to work? Don't they have homework for the kids? Don't they have, it's just a whole different mentality. And I thought, wow, this is the way, I wish I had done that with my children. I wish I could go back and redo, because that's a beautiful way of being.
Well, I've always been my sisters raised all their kids in the East Coast and I raised mine here, and mine have not chose to, they enjoy what they do. They don't do what they should be doing to create money. They're creating money by doing what they love. And that's such a much more important route than trying to prove to someone else. So you had that kind of upbringing. So you had a lot of what I call walls or shoulds or shields or things in front of you.
Yes.
That you had to break down. So can you tell us about your little path here from leaving that world and what a challenge that was?
It was a challenge, but it wasn't a challenge because death sometimes is a doorway.
Mm-hmm.
And so death was the doorway. Illness can be a doorway. Whatever your loss or trauma is can be the doorway. So suddenly I was awakened outside and saying, where am I? Not only that, but I was in South Korea on a vacation when my son passed. And so, it was just, night was day, day was night. I couldn't get on a flight till the next day. I didn't get home for 24 hours. It was just unbelievable. But he came to me in the airport. I saw him just as he was in life, laughing, and then he kind of faded away. So I frantically called my ex-husband and said, I think he's alive. I think he's alive in that refrigerator. You've got to call the ME and see if he's alive. And she was very kind, looked and said, I'm sorry, but he's gone. And that was sort of my awakening to, oh my gosh, there's more to, there is life after death. He's alive in a way, right? He's on the other side. He's in his spirit form, but he's alive. And then it just was very intense. For the next month and 6 months, really, it was really intense that he was around all the time. And I could frantically feel him and sense him, but I couldn't hear what he was saying, which led me to see a medium. And I said, okay, he flew in, he's right beside me. See that candle there? He's waving his hand, he's flickering your candle, and he's talking, but I can't hear what he's saying. Can you tell me what he's saying? So I had a wonderful conversation with her. And the things she said were just like things that he would say. Mm-hmm. Like he kind of said, it is what it is, Mom. I'm on the other side. We just have to deal with this. And that's just something that he would say. It is what it is. Okay. And then after that session, she said, you might have some skills yourself. Most of my clients don't know that their loved ones are in the room and where they're standing and anything like that. So that led me on a path of mediumship and training and crystals and Kabbalah and anything you could imagine. And that was about 6 to 9 months. And then I came across, somebody referred me to an evolutionary astrologer. So evolutionary astrologers also look at your soul path. They're almost mediums in a way, and looking at what you're doing. A guy named Forrest, I think, was one of the beginning ones. But anyway, so he said, well, your soul has chosen to move from Uranus, shame, blame, guilt, to Neptune, a mystical path. And I'm like, a mystical path? I don't even know what a mystical path was. It was one of these things that somebody's talking to you and you're like, I hope this ends pretty soon, because I'm clueless. I'm not even sure what you're talking about. First, I didn't get the triangles and the this and what was connected and what wasn't, and the moons and the suns, and so I didn't know much about astrology. But one thing he stuck in my head is said, a woman that had a reading like yours became a shaman. And I'm like, a shaman? You mean there's shamans still around? In my little left brain world, I hadn't come across any. And so I Googled it. I got off the call and Googled it, and the Four Winds Society popped up, and I talked to an academic advisor. 3 weeks later, I'm on a plane to Joshua Tree, California for a 1 week. It was beginning level of the medicine wheel, the south direction. And I thought, well, I'm probably not going to fit in here.
How many years ago was this?
This was, oh my gosh, 8 or 9. 8 or 9, something like that. Yeah. So I got there and I thought, well, I'm probably not going to fit in. These are all going to be California type people. And if I don't like it, I'll just go down the road to Palm Springs to go to a spa, get a nice facial or something. Right. And so of course it was wonderful. I loved it. And it was just the beginning of a new story for me. And new story where I actually went on a vision quest, and I went through a doorway of a friend of mine who's a lodge leader with the Lakota. And I had a wonderful experience there. And it was sort of this path. Which way am I going to go? Am I going the shaman route with the Four Winds, or am I going the Lakota path? And wow, it was very clear to me to go the shaman route. That was in my book too. There's a great story about deer medicine and Chief Crow Dog. So I think Chief Crow Dog has since passed, but yeah.
I really enjoyed reading your story about killing the
deer.
The deer, because I have to say I found a lot of parallel stories in your book to my own, except that I don't have your background or education or any of those things. But I hit a fox and killed a fox. And I felt terrible. And when I pulled over to the side of the road, and like he took its last breath almost in my hand, and I didn't know what to do. And I felt I should just leave it there, which it bothered me for a long time that I'd left the fox there and didn't take it home in my car. And I had a visiting shaman from Mongolia, who I think it was her first time in the United States, might be second, and a very powerful woman. And after staying with me, she returned back and said she'd seen many spirits around me and she had to initiate me as a shaman. And I had never sat there thinking I wanted to be turned into a shaman. And part of the ritual we had to do was go back to where I had killed the fox. And she explained the importance of what the fox did for me, just like they explained to you about the mother deer.
Yeah.
And when we're doing these things and we're in the midst of them, we're not sure what's actually happening, except we're feeling like you did. You felt you feel very bad, and you feel like you didn't want to hurt this animal. Right. But she explained to me that in some way that animal died to protect me, and that this was one of my protective animals. And I have foxes on my shaman clothing. I've been given foxes, and I felt so grateful that we went back to the spot to honor what had happened, even though there was no fox body left there. But I do think of it's a busy road, and I think of the cars driving by and them seeing me, what is it? I have an Infiniti, a sports car, and she's whipping the car, and she's dressed in all Mongolian clothing, and we're out in the middle on this big highway thing, on this very busy road, and she's whipping my car. in the front where it hit the actual fox.
Yeah.
And so she's doing a whole ceremony there. And then when it's finished, we went back to do the shamanic initiation, but it was all part of that preparation. And as I'm reading your story, I'm saying, oh, yeah, she did the deer. Now she's going on to.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah. The deer was
it's
definitely a
wonderful.
messenger.
That's right. And you had your Lakota person to help you go through the
Mhm.
understanding of what had happened.
Yeah. And actually the
seems
deer
like
came to me on the mountain. I mean, the spirit of the deer came and told me, this is not your path. The path of suffering is not your path, you know, and I fell asleep, and when I woke up, I was 40 feet down the mountain, had been pulled down, don't remember anything about it, but it was clear, no, this is not for you. This is the other way is for you. And that's what I wanted to find out. So
it was a good messenger.
it was a good messenger. It said, we tried to prevent you. We tried to stop you. This is not your path. But, you know, so I overcome all obstacles, rented a car, almost, you know, totaled my car, packed up everybody, got there because, right, left brain people do. It was like overcome obstacles, right? I wasn't going to take any messages out of that. At that moment, I wasn't aware enough of messages. So now I would have said, oh, okay, this is a message. I would have sat with it instead of just plodding on. Right.
Well, it's good for people to know that the next time that they encounter something like this, that maybe
Yes.
they should see, is there a message for them in the
Right.
experience?
What is the
Not just
message here?
roadkill.
Right? What is this doorway? Is something opening, something closing? And
So how did your family and peers react when you told them that you were going to be leaving your life in Washington and going on to, it seems your daughter was very supportive,
my
but
daughter's
it's,
totally supportive. She's amazing. She said, Mom, I think my friends came to her and said, you know, your mother's grieving. She's going to regret this. It's a lifetime appointment. People just don't leave these jobs. And she said, I think my mother should shake her rattle and release her inner butterfly.
and you did.
And I did. And I did. Yeah. Yeah.
It's very beautiful wisdom from
I
someone
know
young.
from a very left brain. She's an engineer, so she's not at all, you know, inclined that way very much. Although now she'll say things like, "Oh, I lost something, Mom. Can you find it? Where is it? You know, can you, you know?" So now she's very open to it. But at that moment, it was big for her to defend her mother, who was going against all convention.
You
Right?
said something that I think was so important, because my experiences since child have been, I'm very connected to death. And I know people's deaths when they're coming, or I physically experience as they're dying, even though I haven't gotten a call they're dying, my body starts doing whatever their body is doing in the death. And I think I'm somebody who sort of meets them at the edge in passing. And I don't never know who's going to come to me to do that. But I feel that the idea that grieving is something, your quote was, where people were saying to you, well, it's enough grieving now. This is time to move on.
Time to get over.
Move on. How can you say that to somebody? Grieving
Whose time?
its
What
own,
time?
and grieving can take a lifetime. It can take years. It's not and I don't know why people judge it as being negative. What is wrong with the heart opening and releasing tremendous amounts of crying? It's not a negative thing. It's a powerful release of loss. And
I think if you look at it as a journey, but I think a lot of times what people are reacting to is people who get stuck in their grief. So the ones who don't move on, the room is a shrine, their life is over, you know, everything is sad forever. So those are the people I try to reach out to with my book, to allow them to see that it is a journey, and you can create a new life out of the ashes of the old one that honors your loved one. So many times we think I have to show my loved one how much I love them, and if I move on, if I create a new life, they're going to think I didn't care. nothing is further from the truth, because what all that does is we're kind of holding on to their kite string. They can't do and be and grow on the other side like they might do, because they're connected to us and we are stuck in our grieving. So I want to help people become unstuck.
This is a very valuable thing you're offering, because the intensity of grief can be overwhelming, and the person's have no one to turn to, and a family member, like they say to them, well, you really just need to move on. But what you're saying is it's not moving on, it's moving through the grief.
Yeah.
Not just saying, okay, I grieve now, I just have to stop crying. No, you have to go through the experience and the teaching. I mean, your son was an incredible teacher. You were blessed with such a, not every spirit is willing to reconnect that way. And so clearly, like he did with you. Yeah. And there's a lot of comfort when you realize that it's only his body that died. Yes. His flesh, it's just flesh and bones and some skin and whatever that's gone, but he is not gone. No. He's more stronger and with you now than
happier. Ever. And happier, right? Yeah. So, I think people always say, I wish I had what you had. I wish my loved one would come and talk to me. And sometimes you have to do a little work of opening to be in that place of seeing. And sometimes, I think one of his life purposes was to bring a spiritual path to me. Mm-hmm. One of his life purposes. So he lived his, karmic load and released his karmic debt. And one of those things was to help me. And I really feel that so strongly, because he's been with me throughout the entire journey. And one of my mentors was watching me giving shamanic rites and doing things. And he said, oh my God, he's right beside you. And he looked at him and said, Alberto Vioto, and looked at him and said, I'm so proud of my mom. Mm. So he's there, and he and I work together. I'm sort of a psychopomp. So I work in between worlds, and I help spirits to cross, especially spirits that suicides, deaths, traumatic things, spirits can get stuck. So there's a lot of church philosophy that, committing suicide is a sin and you're going to go to hell. So spirits get scared. They don't want to go anywhere. They're kind of a little stuck. And so Ben and I can work together, and he can say, hey man, no, it's beautiful on the other side. Come with me. I'll show you the way, and all that kind of stuff. And I've never found hell anywhere. I think we create our own hell here on earth. And certainly most of us have many incarnations in one lifetime. I feel like I've incarnated many times in this lifetime. So I'm not sure incarnation is always after death. I think incarnation is,
I pondered a lot about reincarnation. My parents raised us atheists, and I grew up, we were vegans, and my parents were doing yoga and Buddhist things back in the early 60s. And we'd have people that came that were into UFOs. So I've been exposed to so many, I'm very grateful for the life that I have and the life that I had. But other people would look at that and say, I can't believe that you would be loving to these people that did all these different abusive things, and they don't get that it's all part of the path and the learning, and that if you don't judge it as negative or positive or good or bad, but just as the experience, and then you grow from that. And so I can't say that I grew from a lot of positive, happy-go-lucky days. I grew from things that were painful and things that were letting you to feel confused and doubting yourself, and things that make you then become the compassionate person that you are. Yeah. So I've always felt like, just like you want to help them with getting through their grieving, I've always wanted to help them with the idea about like letting go into forgiveness to whatever the person ever did to them, and just sending nothing but love, even though the person may be deceased, or maybe someone you don't want to see. You just still always honor the good in that person, because everyone has that, even from the things that they've done. Yeah. So I
would tweak that just a little. In my view, what I think is that if we came here with this karmic load, and these are lessons, and even in gifts, and you can get the lesson of that. Like, I would not be here but for that person who is so horrible. I might be somewhere else, I might be doing something else, but I would not be here. And so if you can get to the point of gratitude, forgiveness is a way of saying, oh, they did something wrong to me. But instead of saying they did something wrong, what if it was, thank you for that. Thank you for allowing me to grow in that way and become who I am today. And gratitude is different, you know, it has a different energy. So, and
Well,
then just
I have
thank you.
that.
You might have to say, thank
Yeah,
you, you horrible person that, you know,
it's
but I
it's not
wouldn't,
even that. It's turning that into love. I mean,
yeah,
I have love with these people.
yeah,
And so, but I didn't get to the love part till I went through the forgiveness. And it wasn't just forgiveness to them, it was forgiveness to myself. It's
mhm.
both people who are forgiving for it, it's just like the path, and then becomes the gratitude and the
Yeah,
appreciation and the
well,
love.
thank you for that. I needed that, or I would not, so many things I needed to have happen for me to be, I teach shamanic energy healing. I mean, think about it. It's what a radical life transformation. And I love it, you know, so my life is, and I do healing, and my life has changed for the better. And I live out in the country, and I don't live, I'm not in that, you know, horrible traffic every day and the pollution and the people. And
Ha-
so I was
Have you
given
ever
this
had
great boon, this great gift.
have you ever had any former like judges or people that you worked with that after they decided, well, I guess she isn't crazy, or they had something happen to them and they said, I'm going to call Karen and see if she
Yeah,
might be able to
there are,
guide
there are a few
you
of
through.
those for sure. There's
So
always a
that's
few.
a wonderful,
Yeah.
so you're
It's wonderful. And
presenting a
it's
wonderful
sometimes some
thing
people
to
just
them.
don't know. You know, I just kind of left and went on my merry way. And I didn't stay in touch with everybody either, because I knew that they wouldn't accept it. And I needed a couple years to go through my own healing journey. Right. I mean, I
Mhm.
had to go through this whole process. I have 16 exercises in my book. I had to go through all of that in my own grieving journey before I could pass it on. And I didn't really intend to write a book. I thought, oh, I'll just write a blog about my experiences. And then, oh my gosh, it was all downloaded. Everything was downloaded to me. The whole thing was downloaded. That, you know, sometimes I read parts of it and I go, wow, you know, where did that come from? What came from my higher self? It came from guides and angels and spirits, because it was, you know, it's just not something I thought about. It wasn't my left brain working. It
Well,
was
it's
more than
very well written, even without the left brain.
that. Oh, thank you. Thank you.
In fact, that's what I thought. I wrote a book called A Small Medium at Large. And I was told by some of the publishers that if I didn't have an internet presence, they don't even want to talk to you. So I thought that I wanted to get my book published. I thought that's what I wanted to do. And I ended up starting this podcast. And it's taken me down all these different paths with all these wonderful people. And I don't really care about the book anymore, like whether I publish it or I didn't publish it or whatever happens.
Right,
It,
right, right.
it was something I never thought I would do, talk to people on a Zoom. It just didn't seem, and now I find
Grew up
myself
with it. I
having,
mean, this is all sort of new. We're all kind of a new world, you know?
well, it's a way of reaching people, even if
Yes.
it's 100 here and 200 there, or even two people. If you touch them and it's through this form, then how wonderful that is. And when
Yeah.
people get to listen to people like you, that opens other doors for them. And this was, we couldn't do something like this, 30 years ago. You
No,
couldn't
that's what
connect to that
I figure, you know,
world.
the people that hear this interview, you know, there's going to be those people, like whether it's one or two, they're going to be that person that needs my book, that
Exactly.
needs to hear it. And that's going to be brought to them. And that's why I do these podcasts, because I know that it's reaching the people that need it.
Well, I personally know quite a few people I want to recommend the book to, who've been through this traumatic losses of a child. And I feel like that's be able to reach and help someone with that. I've always considered, when I was thinking about pains of life, and I've done a lot of retreats and a lot of work, I always thought that losing a child would be, for me or any other person, the hardest of any of the challenges or things that one would have to come across in their life. And
Yeah.
of course, also because it doesn't fit in the order. The order is you raise your children, then you die, and they take care of, just like we were saying.
Right.
And when that order gets broken up that way, it's not an expected thing.
No.
And to see how bravely and courageously you went through this is very inspirational. In fact, I promised myself that after our talk, I was going to start eliminating piles of stuff that I have.
Right. Because our stuff, we think that we own our stuff, but our stuff owns us. So for me,
Yes.
getting rid of everything, I had a house full of 30 years worth of things, and my mother's things and her mother's things, and
The Fiesta wear. All I could think
Fiesta.
was she got rid of the Fiesta wear. I love those pictures.
But it was, and a lot of these things had stories, and there was stories of women, but a lot of it was, oh yes, and then this bad thing happened, and that bad thing happened, and then and this one got drunk, and this one did this, and this one was a womanizer, and I'm like, do I need to carry all this stuff with me? It's like a china cabinet full of misery. And so I asked my daughter what she wanted, and she took what she wanted, and she said, now you're going to be mad at me and make me feel guilty later. I'm like, nope, this is it. We're going to release this stuff. And so it can have its own karmic load released too, and go to people in a different way.
The image of you burning your judicial robes,
I did.
I
and the
could
Vision
not
Quest
get that
fire.
image out of my mind. And I felt like I was freeing with you, just the thought of it, because it represents judgment.
Yes.
That robe to me represents judgment. And I've lived a lot in worry of like, oh, are they going to judge me that way? Or am I doing this and nobody understands and they're going to say I'm a bad person? What judgment has, it really, judgment, guilt, these are such important things and so hard to get rid of. And there,
Yes.
I come from a Jewish background. Guilt is part of your life,
Right.
You're supposed to say something positive. My grandmother would say, if you're going to say something nice about yourself, you're going to give yourself a kanahara, and you're bringing all this bad stuff. So if you'd say, oh, I just feel so beautiful today, they go, oh, kanahara, poo, poo, poo. You don't want something to happen to you,
Right. I mean,
think about embracing joy,
Yeah. But that's how we get stuck. And so when you talk about judgment, that's one of the very first practices in the book. How do we get out of non-judgment, out of judgment into non-judgment? How do we get out of suffering into non-suffering? How do we get out of attachments? How do we practice beauty? And, people really sit. So I have people sit in a very ceremonial way, quietly by themselves with a piece of paper and a pie pen and a candle, and write down the people they're judging, or that have been judging them, with this concept of I'm taking it to a fire. So for shamans, fire is a path of rapid transformation. And people resonate with that, because when we go into a church or a temple and there's candles to light, even if we're not a member of that temple or church, most of us will light a candle. So we know that releasing things, releasing prayers to the fire to be taken to spirit or God or whatever you think that is transformational. And so that's what I ask people to do, to sit and write all those things that are running through your mind. Maybe you're judging yourself. I was judging my son. He wasn't supposed to do that. He went to a party, got drunk, and they decided to try heroin. How stupid is that? And he's the one that died because he was 6'8", and they gave him extra, and it was too much. So it's just, how do you get out of that? I was judging him. So what,
And also
why people
blaming
get stuck
yourself.
sometimes, you blame yourself, or the stories that are, I should have done this, I should have done that. I could go the whole way back to his first daycare. Maybe that was caused the problem, right? Maybe there's where I went wrong, right? So carry all these stories. If we write them down instead of carrying them around in our head and ruminating, give yourself time to really sit and write and release them with the intention that they go to spirit, that spirit takes care of them. You're releasing the stories, you're releasing the suffering, you're releasing the judgment, and you're opening your heart to new and different ways. So in the shamanic way is like breathing, right? So we breathe in the fresh air and we release the old. So that's what we're doing with these exercises. We're opening our heart and bringing in new ways and releasing the old ways, releasing the judgments, releasing the suffering, releasing the attachments. And so that we can actually begin that journey away from being stuck to becoming unstuck.
The fire, we just had a fire ceremony here on my birthday in May with a
Mm,
group of Mongolian shamans in training. And when they came, they prepared everything. And the fire was prepared so beautifully, you
yes.
know, like this, but the way the wood and herbs and things that were placed inside, and we had to all go and dance around the fire, and we had to feed the fire fat. And this is very important in what I've learned in their shamanic ways, is feeding the nature, feeding the fire,
Yeah.
feeding the tree. When we finished the end of a all-day ceremony, they laid out all on beautiful cloth under a giant redwood tree here, large quantities of bird seed, nuts, foods that were specifically for all the wild animals and birds,
Mhm.
and everything was being honored. And
Yeah.
it was all things that being honored of nature. And that brings me to this next question that some of us know the answer to, but there may be listeners here who have never talked about shamanism or shamans and only remember it from maybe a story or some sort of a
Right,
thing.
right.
So I was wondering if you could share with our listeners what your personal explanation of being a shaman or what a shaman is.
I think one of the best definitions I've ever heard is the equation E equals MC squared, energy and matter. So the shaman dances on the equal side. We're always going between the world of matter and the world of energy. So to find answers, so we go to the past, we go to the future, we time travel, we time travel. And so shamans are energy workers. So we work with the energy body, and we do that by transforming ourselves from the world of matter to the world of energy to find answers. Mhm.
Very, very nice explanation.
Yeah.
In my relationship with Mongolian shamans, what happens for them is when they go into ceremony, they transform completely into the spirit that's there. I don't know if you want to call it your guide or your connection spirit or the spirit you work with. And a beautiful, gorgeous, hot number babe kind of looking woman turns into a gnarly old man that you just can't even believe when you see it that that could be the same person.
Yeah.
And I've seen the transformation and it's astounding. I don't myself, when I do shamanic blessings and shamanic healings, I just feel that there's some sort of a universal force or energy or something that's going through me, and that's what's happening in the experience, but I myself don't turn into another being.
Mhm.
And I think that, there's other definitions of shamans being also bridges, like you're saying, and
Mhm.
that they work in different cultures. Shamans are the doctor, shamans are the therapist, shamans perform
Oh
many
yeah, there's
different
different,
duties.
there's people that work with the midwives and the day keepers, and then there's the ones that are the wisdom people. And so there's different types of shamans and different levels, at least in the Andean mythology. And so we work with archetypal energies. We work with 4 archetypal energies: serpent, jaguar, condor, hummingbird. So we work with these archetypal energies along with guides and angels and the lineage, our lineage that we're part of. And so I'm part of both 2 lineages. I'm really part of the Lakota lineage and the Andean shaman. So when I do my healing sessions, sometimes I have all of them, they all show up, different people. Right. And they're talking to each other. They all seem to know each other, which was really interesting to me. They're like just all friends and talking to each other and showing me what to do and consulting with each other. Is this going to work? Is that going to work? That kind of thing. So I'm just sort of that hollow bone for spirit to work through. And for the I don't heal anybody. It's the guides and the archetypes and all these spirit heals. I just am a conduit for all of that and get a lot of guidance along the way. So it's endlessly fascinating. It's like, how could you, like, what would you do that would be more interesting than the law? Well, become a shaman. That's what I suggest. It's endlessly fascinating.
Well, I've always, nothing against you or anything, but I always considered lawyers as shysters and, people that
Well,
are
they
just
can do
doing
that.
things. There's many of those, and I'm sure
yeah,
there's
many of
really
those. Yep, yep.
good lawyers, or like yourself, you went back into practice and what are you doing now? So but
Well, so some of it, COVID kind of disrupted, right? And so I got my Pennsylvania license restored and, looking into doing some things, but things just, things that I thought I was going to do just kind of got a little shortchanged. And then I moved to be with my daughter and grandchildren. So we'll see where that all takes me, but at least I'm open. I mean, I'm ready. I've got my license and I had given all that up. So, so now I'm ready to begin again. Where that
I'm just
takes me,
saying,
I don't know.
you'll bring a whole new energy and experience to that work
Exactly.
because you're going to come from not your left brain anymore.
Yes,
So
exactly.
I think you would do some really fantastic work in those areas. Just, you know, uh, getting more awakened and aware in different fields can only affect all the other people around you also.
It does. And,
So
so just like you were saying, so the writing, I did a lot of writing in my judicial career and I wanted to throw all that out. I didn't want anything to do with that. I was going to be a shaman. And then it sort of all merges. So our experiences are not for nothing, right? So my writing experience, I was able to combine with the spiritual to make the book happen. So it's not like you have to throw everything away, throw the baby out with the bathwater. You can combine things in a way, which is a
I
beautiful
tried to
way
get
to go.
in. You also got a fabulous publisher because the Hay House,
Yeah.
I tried to just get in the door. I can't even get a call in there. So
Yeah, it's very hard, but if you take one of their writing courses, that's what I did.
that's what I was told. You have to take
Yeah,
their writing
and then,
course.
there's a competition and I won the competition, which was really amazing. And
Great.
so, yeah. So that's one way to get in the door, but it's hard, I mean, that's what I was told, you'll never find a publisher, you'll never find an editor, you'll never find, and I just thought, well, Spirit's writing this book, so I think it's all going to happen. And it all just all
Beautiful.
happened. I mean, it's not my book, it's Spirit's book. It's a guide book for people. And so I thought, whatever is going to be, is going to be. If I have to self-publish, I'll self-publish. Whatever it's going to be, is going to be. However, Spirit wants to put this out in the world.
I I I I was wondering if you might be able to talk a little bit about the exercises that you have. If someone was listening now, they're
Mhm.
understanding about the writing things on a piece of paper, and it doesn't necessarily mean judgment. There can be other things that you do that you want to release from yourself.
Right.
And it's a very simple, like it's not so difficult and it sounds so simple, but powerful things will come from the
It is
burning of these.
powerful because when we sit in ceremony, we sit quietly with ourselves and
Mhm.
have a candle. And we have, create a sacred area around us, however that is to you. If you want to light a candle, if you want to have sage, or you want to have crosses, or whatever you want to call in, whatever you want to call in, and just sit in a sacred way. So you're getting out of your everyday brain, your reptilian brain, the fight, flight, feeding, all those kind of things. And we get to our ceremonial brain in the neocortex. And in the neocortex, we can release things with like a feather in a breeze, instead of at the physical level where everything is heavy and hard and difficult. So that's what we're doing. We're getting to that ceremonial space, and we're working there in ceremony, releasing to the fire things that need to be released with our intention. And our intentions are so powerful. And then bringing in and opening our hearts to new ways. So each exercise has that concept of releasing and bringing in, releasing and bringing in. And so one of the things that I always tell people to do that are grieving, one of the things we lose is the beauty way. What does that mean? I always tell them, take a piece of paper or a magnet or stick a magnet on your refrigerator, practice beauty today. Do one thing today that brings beauty to your life. Because, when we're caretakers, when we have children who are in addiction, when we lose children or our spouses, people, parents around us, that process takes us away from the practice of beauty. We almost feel like we can't even think about doing anything that brings us beauty because that would be wrong because we're grieving, we're mourning. But at some point, it is, yes, we have to get back in touch with the things that brought us beauty so that we can actually be on this journey and not be stuck, so that we're releasing the kite strings of our loved ones so they can go and do what they are going to do on the other side. And so, yeah.
I- and there's some kind of strange, I don't know where, the guilt thing or some little voice
guilt.
that comes up in your head that
Right.
says, like, I love to have flowers everywhere. And
Mhm.
I find that there's something very beautiful and healing about having flowers. So I have flowers outside growing everywhere that I can pick and put into my house. But then when we get into the drought, I start saying, oh God, we should only save the water for the tomatoes, or we should only, but then I said, no, we still have to have some beauty. We still have to have some flowers growing. It's
Yeah.
just important for the soul just to walk up to your house and see some roses.
Mhm.
And notice that you don't have to have 500 roses, just
Right.
seeing the beauty of the rose in itself. And I loved your reminder of that about beauty. And
Yeah.
it said to myself, I'm not going to feel guilty if for all of a sudden I'm a little late because I had to stop and pick some flowers because I
Right.
wanted to do that. And you also were talking about how so many times people are expecting you at a certain time, but something might deviate. And you live now with the idea that they have to understand something might change. You're planning to go there, but if
Right.
something else got in the way, you might have to change that path because you've learned that the left brain way of just being on time and doing what you're supposed to do
By
might not
force.
lead you.
Right.
Exactly. And I've,
Right.
I've always fought with that. I've never been able to, I've never had a job. I've always worked for myself because I could never fit into the things with other people. I always
Yeah.
felt like I had to do my own thing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I I always felt that, oh, I always thought of wondering what would I have been had I done the career success route. And after I keep interviewing different people, I keep going, oh, it's okay. You didn't do that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, I think it's, I've changed my mind 180 degrees from where I was. And the way we raise our children, so much fear for our children. You gotta do this and you gotta succeed and you gotta stay in school and you gotta do this and you gotta do that. And you want to be successful and everybody wants to be on the hamster wheel, because outside the hamster wheel of doing what's expected, who knows what could happen, right? It could be
Well,
terrible, right? So we bring fear into the picture.
I was reading at the end, I think it was toward the end of your book about synchronicities
Yeah.
and honoring synchronicities. And I have always done that my whole life. And I've been made fun of by people thinking, oh, you just made it like that, or you
Yeah.
can't, so as I'm reading your book and I'm finding all these things that you and I have experienced on our spiritual path with the same persons,
Yeah.
I had to quickly include this little synchronistic story because I couldn't believe you and I were going to these same places for awakenings.
Right.
So it's the mid 80s, and I don't know yet that I have cancer at the time, but I'm doing all these retreats, and I'm in my late 20s, early 30s, and I'm doing all these different retreats, and I do a retreat with it's a 10-day retreat. I think it was called this, maybe the spiritual care of the dying, or I'm not exactly sure, but we had a place in Oregon in Brighton Bush, and it was Ram Dass, and it was sort of a blend of all these different things. Somebody said to me, oh, when you go, it's going to be like a circus. And they were right, because he offered so many different things. Wavy Gravy was there, and this monk who did Tai Chi was there. And so there were all these different activities and things going on, but we would meet 100 and some odd people in a room each day and do chanting together. And we would do chanting into the night, to the point where the next morning I couldn't remember what the 4 words we chanted were. I had said them so many times that I couldn't remember.
Yeah.
But all of that seemed to open up something inside of me. And there was a little dome there that was for Native American, like an honoring temple thing. That was a small dome on the property. And I went into the dome, and I came to later, years later, find out it was called a Kundalini experience. But at the time, I had no idea what was going on to me and why my body was being pulled down into the earth like a magnet. And these different dead people were sitting around me and giving me information. And one of them was a message for Ram Dass, and it came from Neem Karoli Baba, who was this huge man sitting on my body and telling me, this is what you have to tell him. Tell him to get on with it. And all I kept thinking later was, because this lasted for about 3.5 hours, all I kept thinking later was, why would a spiritual man say, get on with it? I would have expected some kind of wisdom words or some kind of, I don't know, something more, right? And then I'm thinking to myself, should I tell Ram Dass, or is he going to think I'm crazy, you know? And as I crawl out, because I couldn't walk after the experience, I crawled out of the dome. This man came up to me and looked at me, and he said, I know what has just happened to you. And he said, we have a temple in Taos, New Mexico called the Hanuman Temple. My name is Vishnu. And if you have any more of these experiences, we would love for you to call us or come out or whatever, come to visit. So I go out there once and I visit on just a regular time, and I see the Hanuman monkey statue. And I go back to California. And some months later, I have a dream. And the dream tells me that I have to go back to the Hanuman temple, and there's someone that's going to be there for me to meet. So my sisters are here, and in this point in my life, I'm following my dreams messages. I'm not, you know. So I asked my sisters, can you watch my daughter? I think she was about 10 years old. They were visiting from New York. I said, I'm leaving tomorrow on a plane. I have to go to New Mexico right away. There's a man waiting for me from a dream. So, you know, they said she's crazy as a loon when I left.
For sure, for sure.
And I go to the temple, and it turned to be the Bandara, I think it's called. It's a very big celebration that everyone there in Taos at the Hanuman Temple gives food and things, and hundreds of people come. And I walk up to the temple and I see this man, and I say, oh, you're the man in my dream that I'm supposed to meet here today. And I'm telling him the whole story in English. And he looks at me and he says, yo soy huichol, no habla inglés. So he's not someone who speaks English. He's a Huichol Indian man who's there on a special tour for a museum, showing his work and art for the first time in the United States. And we connect. I tell him I'll pick you up tomorrow and we'll go to the Bandelier National Monuments. And that starts that was the early 1985, late 1985, early 1986. I have been involved with the Huichol Indian people since then. And my involvement is deep. I've been there for 6 trips. I've brought my father there. I've brought my husband there. And I've participated in 2 peyote ceremonies, the ceremonies of the corn. I don't have a translator to usually know what's going on. I just immerse myself into whatever the experience is. But none of that would have happened had that not little seed been planted in that little dome I crawled out of from this awakening experience.
Yeah.
And I had to share it because when I'm reading that you go off to the Hanuman temple in Taos, doing this. I know it wasn't the 80s, but.
And of course I go in there and I'm sobbing. As soon as I cross into the temple, I'm sobbing. I mean, it's just like everything's coming out. And then I'm having this conversation with Hanuman, you know, and so I got this, you know, they were all around, they're watching this whole thing, and I got a piece of fruit, you know, that was in the temple. And so, and he told me, you know, your son's death is not your fault, right? This is not your fault. So it was really beautiful, but you know, here I am, and it was mind blowing. That's mind blowing.
And this was like 8 years ago. So that Hanuman temple has been there since you know, when I went there, they had just got the statue, had just come a few, you know, it hadn't been there that long. And it was really the beginnings of their temple.
Yep.
And I'm so happy to hear that they're still there and still
Oh,
having
yeah, they're still there.
transition, people like you having an experience when you go there, because you're in the middle of nowhere in Taos, and it had the most powerful energy.
Oh, the most
It
powerful energy.
was, and I
Whew.
kept thinking, this is a statue. How could a statue have so much energy? But it was powerful, wasn't
And it
it?
had, the statue has its own story too, about bees. Something about bees had infested the statue or something, and that's how they knew that this was an emanation of Hanuman. So anyway, the statue has its own powerful story of
Well,
acceptance as an emanation of Hanuman. So
you're the
anyway,
first
it was
person
amazing.
you're the first person I've ever met who's both gone to this same place
Yeah,
and
yeah.
had a powerful
Amazing.
experience.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
that was very good. There was also something else you wrote about photons and the double slit.
Oh, yes.
And
Yeah. Quantum
yes,
physics.
quantum physics. I just wanted you to know, I actually did an experiment at the Institute of Noetic Sciences with that
Oh,
machine.
very cool.
And when you were describing it, I was kind of understanding the machine a little better than I did when I was doing the experiment.
Right.
So our experiment was to use your mind to interfere, because it's an actual physical thing that's going on as these
Yes.
photons are going through this. And it was hooked up to a computer so it could show you that you were making an effect on the photon.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was
Whether it's a particle or a wave, it changes
Right.
back and forth depending on the interaction with us. And
Right. So our
world does the
interaction
same
was
thing,
stop
everything.
it,
Yeah.
go right in the middle and stop it. And when Dr. Dean Radin asked me to come and do this experiment, I had been grieving for a year over the death of my father. And I was very participated. This was the most important person in my life that had lost and cared for every day, 24/7, as all my brothers and sisters did. We took very good care of my dad. And I participated in his cremation. I put his body in the oven. I opened up the box before, and he was dressed in Mongolian clothing I had put on him. And I brought in all the 4 elements, air, water, fire. And I did this ceremony on him that I could not believe I could contain myself and not be crying and not be, it was like very powerful. And when we put him in the oven, I had to pay extra to do this, by the way. If you want, you can assist in a cremation, but they make you pay extra. And I just felt it was what I needed to do to go through and see my dad through this whole experience and be there while the ashes were falling on me from the chimney outside, and and taking home his ashes hot, right after they came out. And I felt that like a very completed experience, but the rest of my family and relatives thought that was like a horrifying thing. And this was not a horrifying thing. At a certain point, my husband was the only one with me, and none of the people in the funeral parlor were there. They leave you alone. And I looked inside. My husband said, look, and there was like a little opening, and I could see my dad's whole body burning in flame. And it was like an Alex Gray painting, seeing the colors. And instead, I was feeling like the release was so powerful and so letting go of him that I don't know. I spent a year crying, and I was crying before he even was diagnosed that he was going to die or was even sick, because I knew his death was coming. And it took so much out of me that I never believed I could do anything psychic or telepathic ever again. And I had been working with these institute for years. And when Dean called me, I said, I don't think I can do anything, He said, just come. And my husband said, just go and you'll see. It ended up being an anomalous experience, because when I sat there and felt this, all of a sudden this tremendous anger came up out of me as I was locked in the Faraday cage. And I just said, you know what? I'm going to blow the whole fucking thing up. And the second I did that, all the electricity went out everywhere.
Wow.
And Dean always refers to it as this anomalous experience, because it took out all the data that would show that I had interfered with the thing, because every electrical thing went out.
Yeah.
So we couldn't show the graph showing the showing how it hits,
Well, you didn't
split
need a
and go
graph. You had that physical manifestation. You didn't, who needs a graph, right? That's fantastic. Oh my gosh.
So I think that when we mix some of the science with some of these things, for me, I find that I learn all these amazing things about myself because I was so involved in my grief for so long, and it took so much out of my heart and soul that I didn't think I was ever going to be
Yes.
able to return to Gail.
Right.
And that brought me back. And all I kept saying was, I don't care what you found out, my mojo is back.
Right. Right. Right.
And I was like released after that.
Yeah.
And who knew it would be through that?
And that's the beauty of going on a journey and seeing that it's a journey, right? And so going through these processes and looking at things like non-doing, non-engagement, what are we doing? How are we keeping ourselves so busy so that we don't sit with our own emotions, right? How do we get to this part of indigenous alchemy? So indigenous alchemy means the innate or inherent desire for transformation. And I think that's part of being human. We are not meant to be stuck. We are meant to transform our physical body, transform into homo luminous, transform into a spiritual person, transform our grief. So that's part of being human, and being stuck is not native to us. And so many of the people that I come to me for healing with all sorts of ailments, if I really look back, they have some kind of unresolved grief or loss in their life, and it's manifesting as cancer or autoimmune or whatever it is. But it's holding on to that stuck energy of grief. And so, we can't please anybody anyway. So if you grieve too long, they're going to say you need medicated. If you don't grieve long enough, they're going to say, oh, she didn't care. So you might as well do it your own way. Right? You can't win. So you might as well say, I'm on a journey. It's my journey, butt out. I'm going to be on this journey as long as I need to be. And the journey that I'm going on is to get to this place where I am going to be reborn, create a new life out of the ashes of this, and honor my loved one. And so let me be. So it's not that I'm stuck, I'm grieving, I'm mourning, I'll never change, I'll never do anything. But it's like, hey, I'm on a journey of rebirth. I'm on a journey of rebirth. How about that?
And you rebirthed into a form also of setting up a situation where you can help others.
Yeah.
You're not taking what you've learned in your journey and just keeping it for yourself. You're going out with your book and going on these podcasts and sharing, so that some person who maybe's never been able to talk about it might hear this and get your book and go through some transformation
in a little different way, instead of all these old cultural and family and societal norms and things that we've absorbed. Let's bust through some of that. Let's go on our own personal journey, and let's create a new life out of the ashes of the old one. Let's bring beauty back into our life so that our loved ones on the other side can benefit, and so that they can go and do what they need to do. So one of the most beautiful things, we weren't particularly religious in my house. So my son came to me, and I was still doing the thing on his death day. Oh, this is terrible, so sad. And he came to me, he's like, Mom, will you knock it off? He did. He's like, this is getting really old. I'm right here. And he said, and I'm busy right now. I'm in the Jesus pod, and it's really cool. We're doing all kind of cool stuff. Jesus is really cool. Not like the Bible. This is like, Jesus is very cool. And so I thought to myself, why am I doing this? I feel like I have to be like, oh, his death day. Oh, terrible, terrible, terrible. Oh, Ben, come visit me. Okay. Then I was sort of like, okay, so that's sort of my next book is how do we bring joy back into grieving?
That's
a blueprint for joy. How do we do this? How can we do this in a different way?
And I've done some work with some people where they don't grieve when they've lost. Oh, there's Murphy.
That's Murphy. He's been like bugging me. Like, let me up. I want to talk too.
Is he cute? Hi, Murphy.
All right, Murphy, you gotta go back down now.
How good he was to stay with other people while you traveled the world.
I know. It was always synchronicity. Somebody came along that could take him and that would love him and take care of him. It was just like everything was planned. All I had to do was participate, say yes. All I had to do was say yes, which is mostly the thing we have to do for life is to say yes.
That's been one of my, and I also take in all kinds of strange people that I just meet and I invite them home to come to us, and
Yeah. Yeah.
my
Just,
door is open as well as my heart.
yeah.
Well, I would just like you to explain because I'm so, some people just don't understand synchronicities, and I know we're getting on in our time. So I was wondering if you could just talk to them a little bit about the definition of synchronicities and the positive effect of that.
Right. So synchronicities are those things that happen that we don't even like. You'll look at the clock, it'll be 111 or 222 or 333. And you think, oh, isn't that strange? Or somebody will, you'll be thinking about somebody and they'll call you. Right. And so we just kind of go, oh, well, that isn't that interesting. What a coincidence. But what if it's not? What if it's messages from the universe? What if it's synchronicities? This whole thing about me always finding the right person to take care of Murphy, because Murphy, couldn't, trying to travel with a dog to other countries with quarantines and all that was not going to work. So, I had to find, and it was always the right person at the right time, or the right person would come and say, oh, come stay with me, or, oh, come, let's go drive to Taos. So let's go to the Ajmer, to the Sufi temple. So that I had another experience with a Sufi shrine. So there's always the right, oh, let's go to Africa. Let's go. And then sure enough, there was an African shaman. Let's go here. Let's go there. There was always that quality to things happening. And you think, wow, look at that opened up, or look at that doorway. And instead of saying, oh, well, maybe I shouldn't, that's not it. Why am I going to do that? That's just, don't talk yourself out of it, but instead say, what an opportunity. Or like the thing with the deer, what is that trying to tell me? Instead of just saying, oh, well, that's interesting. Well, it's more than interesting. What if it's a message? So what if we become, as we awaken and we open up, what if we become, instead of like the old station, the TVs that only had one or two channels, what if we're become like Dish Network with hundreds of channels, and we're getting all this information as we awaken? And what if we're open to that receiving?
That's a
Right. So
great
I was
example.
recently, I wanted a little desk, a little mobile one on wheels, and I saw one that was really fancy. It was like $400 or $500. I'm like, it's like this big, right? I don't too much money. So I walked in. I just had this idea that I needed to go to what's one of those places, those discount places. But anyway, and I just had to go there right then. So I'm like driving there. I'm like, well, I'll look around. Sure enough, here's a little desk that I got for $80, the exact thing that I wanted, on wheels for $80. And it was just those callings, those urges, instead of saying, oh, well, that's nothing. Why am I doing that? And talking yourself out of it, just go with it. Okay. So I'll go to, the store and just check around, and sure enough, there it is. There's a thing I was looking for.
I that's how I always shop.
Yeah.
It just appears.
It
I just
appeared.
set out in my mind things that I need. And all of a sudden I'm walking by and it's hanging off a shelf. It's not even where it's supposed to be. And the things just appear.
It just
And
appeared.
I always like to, I never take for granted. I always have nothing but gratitude, gratefulness for any of the information or things or synchronicities that happen. I never say, oh yeah, this always happens to me. I just do it like this. And I always think of
Oh,
it as it's always anew. When I do a blessing with someone and someone who is deceased comes through me and says a few words that brings comfort to that person and they know exactly what it means. I don't know if that's going to happen. I'm very grateful when it does. And I always feel like, ooh, like a little surprise inside. I never take for granted that, oh, yes, I'm a shaman and I can do all these things this way. That's not my approach. It's
right.
more like the things we'll just have to see how the things come up, whatever happens.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know if that's a lack of confidence or I don't know, but it just feels like that feels comfortable to me.
Yeah, I feel the same way, because not everybody always wants to come through or has a message at that moment or in that time. So I'm real respectful of their time, place too, of
And
people.
in fact, one of the persons that I did, a dear friend of mine, when he lost his partner of 40 years or whatever, and we tried to do this little shamanic blessing together a year later after he passed. It was the first time I was met with resistance. And I thought that's really important to know, that there are some people who know that you're connecting with them and they don't want to do that because they didn't believe it when they were in their body, and they don't want to believe it now as a spirit. And
Yeah.
you have to honor that's where they are in that place. And we made a connection anyway, but the connection was him letting me know I don't believe in any of this stuff.
It's okay too.
Exactly.
That's all right. You got to take it as it is. Oh gosh, well,
So,
it's great speaking with you.
yes, I just wanted to end with any words of wisdom or anything that you'd like to share with our audience, and that the audience will know that they can find you. I'll have all the information in the
Okay. Yeah,
description on
it's
how to
that
reach you, and
practice beauty. Put that
we'll
on
have your book on.
Oh, good. Thank you.
So we'll have pictures of the book, and we'll have all the places for them to find it,
Oh,
and where they can connect with you if they would like to schedule some sort of a
yeah.
Zoom conference or meeting with you.
Yeah, you have
So if
my website, Karen
I have
Johnson.
your website, your Instagram, your Facebook,
all that. Yeah.
and that will all be on there, and plus your book. And I was just wondering if you could leave our listeners with some sort of shamanic wisdom or blessing or something that you'd like to share.
Yeah. So I talked about this a little bit early, but really the practice of beauty, put that on your refrigerator. Do one thing, one small thing, like you say, cut up flowers for a vase, go to an art show, do one thing for yourself every day so that you can dig new neural networks, right? Instead of digging grief and despair and hopelessness deeper and deeper, you begin to dig those neural networks for beauty and for gratitude and for love and for hopefulness instead of hopelessness. And so I think that's the most important thing. And remember that you are wired for transformation.
Yes.
Wired for transformation, and being stuck in your grief doesn't help you or your loved one on the other side. So you want to, and that's, if you sign into my website, you'll see 8 things spirits on the other side want you to know. And that is, as you stay stuck, so they stay stuck. And so we want to release them too.
And, I think that because of all of the documentation now of near-death experiences,
Yeah.
and I've experienced it myself, so many, the most common thing, and I watched it in my dad's death when his arms were reaching up and he could no longer swallow or speak. You could see arms reaching down for him. It was a very amazing thing. And when everyone says in their near death, I saw my mother and my father, and they said, it's not your time. You need to go back. But that everyone that I've heard has always said they've made a connection with spirits of people that they loved on an earthly plane in the body.
Yeah.
So I think that there's a lot of comfort in knowing that it's truly in death just a transformation, and you haven't lost your son, you haven't lost your family, you reconnect with them in spirit.
Yeah.
And you and your son are a beautiful example of not only connection, but how much teaching and learning the two of you are sharing with the world.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And don't be surprised, he may come visit you too. He likes to
Oh,
visit people.
not a problem. In fact, I was looking for him this morning when
You may find he may come visit. He likes to do that. Check in and say, "Hey, hi, you know me."
and I only just got the nicest feelings about him from your book and how you
Yeah.
spoke about him.
Yeah.
And just I know it was only 27 years in that part, but you're with him for lifetimes.
Oh yeah, for sure. For sure.
So thank you so much for coming
Well,
here
thank you for
today.
having me.
It's been a pleasure. And I want to tell our listeners, you can like, subscribe, share, comment. You can send questions, and you'll be able to reach out to Karen after you look at the description, and you'll know how to contact her. For those of you who are in the midst of grieving, I suggest you do it ASAP so that you can go and move on and move through and learn. So thank you very much
Thank
Remember
you.
that stories can heal, and I think we shared a lot of good healing stories here today. So
Many
have a
blessings to
wonderful
you and
week,
your listeners.
and blessings to all of you. I'm
Too.
going to give us a 5-second little ending here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Much love.